Welcome to another edition of the Corner Booth Podcast here from the Snowdon Deli. I'm Aaron Rand from CJD, along with Bill Brownstein of the Montreal Gazette, and our very special guest today. Long time, I don't even know how to frame what you've done for a living other than, a former federal politician, provincial politician, and probably one of the most knowledgeable people on the Constitution who's not a constitutional lawyer. Clifford Lincoln, thank you so much for being with us. And an actual constitutional lawyer who also teaches at the University of Montreal, Fred Bérard. Thank you both for being with us today. Before we get into what we're here to talk about, which is kind of the latest issue that sparked controversy in Quebec over Mark Carney's remarks over 50% plus one, just want to acknowledge we're here today, a day after the passing of Claude Lemieux, great Montreal Canadiens hockey player who just a couple of days ago was the torchbearer at a Canadiens game. And then we got the news yesterday afternoon of his passing. Fred, I understand you knew Claude Lemieux very well. You grew up in the same neighborhood.
Yeah, and was pretty close to the family at one point. And her mom, Rachel, was running this small restaurant in the Mont-Laurier Arena, and for whatever reason, I was probably her favorite. So she always used to tell me, Fred, bring me your hockey card. I'm going to go to the Forum next week, and we're going to get those signs for you. And next time Claude's going to score a goal, the puck will be for you. And that goal was against Chicago. I recall that. Probably it was, we just, took a puck from the training, whatever. But it's one of my greatest child memory. I have a picture of myself and the Stanley Cup and Claude in '86. And a few years ago, he called me. I was at the chalet, I recall. I got a number from Orange County. Don't know anyone from Anaheim. So, it's Claude Lemieux. How you doing? Good. My mom is harassing me because she wants you to write my biography. What would you say? I said, yeah, well, of course, sure, anytime. And so when do you want to start? Well, I'm not ready yet. I need to think about it and blah, 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 blah. I said, oh, come on, you need to do it right away. And he said, well, I'm not sure I have time for that, frankly, for now. And I was putting some kind of pressure. And he answered back. He said, hey, you know why I got some success in the NHL? I said, yeah, well, a few ideas, but go ahead. He said, because I was I'll say it in French. J'avais une tabarnak de tête de cochon, which can be translated by whatever you guys like. And he just said, well, but you're calling me. He said, yeah, that's true. But I promise you something.
Anyway,
if we go with a biography, you're gonna be the one in charge. And
you were saying that he was a very complicated guy. There was a documentary that came out, and he really didn't want to get personal in it. And you were mentioning that he really wanted to keep his personal life away from everything else. And if you want to elaborate on that, because it was very.
I think that he was for the biography stuff. He was a bit scared. I talked with Jocelyn, his brother.
He used to play with the Canadiens.
2 months ago, yeah. And the real answer why, the real reason why he was a bit scared about the biography was not because of a lack of time. It was because of, he knows that, when you write a book on somebody, you ask for testimony from X and Y. And I thought he was a bit anxious about the result of what would people say about myself. But yeah,
he was very gregarious on the outside, but you said inside it was a whole other.
He was one of a kind. When I started watching hockey, that was because of him. In March '86, when he got recalled, when Mario Tremblay got injured in Quebec City, they called back Claude, and I started watching hockey at this precise time. They won the Stanley Cup a few months later, and it was some kind of a model for a lot of people, but for myself, being very intense, tenacious. You have some goals, go get it, but you can do it, right? But the dark side of that, if I may say, is that there's so much intense. Sometimes you burn some kind of bridges in a way, and I have the chance to know Serge Chavard pretty well. I was having a beer with Serge in February or March. And I was each and every time I see him, I said, well, man, you have made the worst trade ever. Trading Claude Lemieux for Sylvain Turgeon, what the hell is that? And he was always, I know. But Claude was a very complicated guy. He was and Fatbirds didn't want to coach him any longer. And anyway, but the guys won 4 Stanley Cups, 1 Conn Smythe. He was 6 on the most game played in NHL in the playoffs, and he's 9 right as of now as the most goals in NHL history in playoffs. And who's 8 and who's 10? 8 Maurice Richard and 10 Jean Béliveau.
Wow.
So he's in
company.
this pretty good company.
All right.
Yeah.
Listen, again, terrible story. And of course, our thoughts and prayers are with his family because it's a difficult time for them as well. Let's get to what we're talking about today. The other day, Mark Carney actually commenting, I guess it was the Alberta separation, a referendum question that brought this on, saying 50% plus 1 would not be enough for a province, be it Alberta or Quebec, to separate. And that, of course, here in Quebec,
Right.
it's verboten. You can't say that because we know what happens. You were involved, Mr. Lincoln, as part of Robert Bourassa's government in the 1980s when he invoked the notwithstanding clause. You are and were a man of principle. That caused you to leave this particular Liberal Party at the time. When you hear this now coming up again, it's now, 45 years later, roughly? What goes through your mind? What are you thinking?
Well, it's I find it very depressing, really, that we go back to the same thing again and again. We've gone through this trauma twice. It split this province and divided people. We've lost so much of a brain drain and companies that have left us, and people have been torn apart, families have been divided, and now we're back to the same thing again. Whether it's 50 plus 1 or 55 or 60, the very fact of having a referendum is in itself is such a traumatic event that to go back to it, I think it's just terrible to think about.
Were you surprised that the Prime Minister waded into the debate?
In a way, yes, because personally, I think if people in Quebec should decide 50% plus 1, how can you fight against that? That's the way it is. I hope it'll never get to that, nowhere near, but I hope we will also avoid the trauma of a referendum itself.
But did he, Mr. Carney, open up a Pandora's box here, basically by putting some wind in the sails of the PQ and all the rest? All of a sudden, people are getting very, very excited, and even CAC people are coming out and saying, well, if it comes down to this, I might have to vote yes. And in fact, I think that's what we're seeing.
I think that Mark Carney is probably right now our most intelligent politicians for a long time. Remember when he was in Quebec City in February, just right before the Parti Québécois reunion, right? With the Bonhomme Carnaval stuff,
Right.
and he said, well, the conquest was a matter of friendship between Anglos and Francos, and then Paul Saint-Pierre Plamondon just snapped, and he spent 3 days talking about, that conquest and the fact that we've been assimilated and all that. At first, I was like, what the hell is Mark Carney saying? I mean, a matter of friendship, that's quite the opposite. That was a war, right? But I remember saying to myself after, well, that was a smart move, because the PQ spent the whole 3 days talking about old stuff of 1760 that nobody cares any longer in Quebec, instead of talking about all the stuff they were about to talk. So I think that why I'm saying that is that Mark Carney is doing, in my sense, precisely the same thing here. Saying, well, 50 plus 1 might not be enough. So what's happening? Everyone talks about that, right? The PQ said, well, that's enough. But Carney knows that people in Quebec, people in Alberta would certainly think about the fact, what if the federal government does not accept to recognize our, the positive result of an election? So might be just too much trouble. Do we really want to get into that kind of, circus again and all that? especially with Trump, the tariffs, and all. So I think it was a very calculated move.
So who does this benefit, though?
Carney's and his vision of Canada, because we know right now there's only like 30% of Quebecers that would like to have a referendum.
Yeah.
So if you tell them, well, probably that Ottawa will not recognize the 50+1 results. I mean, I'm quite sure that the support will not, go that way. It's gonna go down. Some people are saying, well, it's good for the PQ. I don't think it's good for the PQ because a lot of people in Quebec at the time, remember that, did recognize the relevance of the Clarity Bill. And this is one of the reasons why Lucien Bouchard left as a premier, because he said, well, there's no way. I mean, what the hell is going on? People is like supporting that kind of bill. I'm out. So, yeah, pretty much it.
Can I travel back, if you can, Mr. Lincoln? Let's go back to 1980, the Bourassa government, when the whole idea of the notwithstanding clause kind of came out of nowhere. Robert Bourassa decided to invoke it, and of course, you're famous for saying rights are rights are rights. When that happened back then, do you remember the conversation you had with the premier about, you know what, we should not be having this?
Very, very much. In fact, the difference between then and now is that in the Bourassa's time, we had caucuses, repeated caucuses that went on into the night, very emotional, very tense, and the whole thing was discussed over. It took a week or 10 days after the judgment, and then he convened a congress of the party, a general meeting of the party, where it was discussed. The young people were there, spoke. There was a lot of emotion, and then he spoke to a lot of us, and I remember speaking to him privately once just before the vote, and he just kept very guarded. He said he hadn't made up my mind, but I'm sure that he had. And finally, when he decided, I think he told us that he did it because he wanted to avoid social unrest. It was a very divisive issue, and he felt that to use a notwithstanding clause. And there was a tremendous amount of debate in public. It was quite a backlash in many ways. So when it came up for renewal, he avoided it by asking Claude Ryan to find a way of some kind of measure which would comply with the Supreme Court judgment. And so they didn't renew it. And when you see the difference with today, where we don't debate it, we don't consult, we just apply this clause preemptively. We've been doing it now almost as a routine, not only Quebec, but Ontario, Saskatchewan, Alberta, but Quebec mostly, on major legislation where we put aside fundamental rights and legal rights. I mean, I think it's a scandal. It's unacceptable, and the irony of it is that as a country we subscribe to the Universal Declaration of Human Rights, and the Charter of Rights of Quebec is based on that. The Charter of Canadian Charter is based on that. So we say we comply to the Universal Declaration of Human Rights worldwide, but within Quebec, we just put all these rights aside. I mean, it makes no sense at all. And to think that the Premier of Quebec, the first thing that she spoke about when she met Carney after being nominated as Premier was the notwithstanding clause, which she says it's an important tool of the Quebec nation, and she keeps repeating it, and now she's renewing it 1 year ahead of time without consultation, without debate. I think it's a scandal, really.
The Corner Booth podcast is brought to you in part by the Snowdon Delicatessen, where we are. 75 years in business, the home of Montreal's greatest smoked meat, plus carnotzel, potato latkes, and the famous Snowdon Deli party sandwiches. That's the Snowdon Delicatessen. Well, so let me ask you then, what the last thing that Mr. Lincoln said, preemptively renewing the clause when there's no need to it, there's no rationale to it. What's that all about?
Yeah, well, I do agree with Mr. Lincoln. In a way, the preemptively use of notwithstanding clause is crazy. But you know it is even more crazy than that? Is the fact that the parliaments have no obligation at all to demonstrate that when they use the notwithstanding clause, they are going for an objective that is real and urgent. There is no obligation for the legislator to say, yeah, you know what? I do this because I think this is important.
Here's why.
Now, yeah, exactly.
So, I mean, think about it. So, preemptively speaking, frankly, I don't mind that much in the sense that if you have a real objective, all right, we can discuss that. But if you don't have that obligation, I mean, that means that you can do it preemptively, and you can do it like in an omnibus way. I mean, all the bill is subtracted to the Charter of Rights. All of that. And I remember in the Bill 21 in Superior Court a few years ago, Justice Blanchard was the judge in charge. Did ask to the Procureur Général du Québec, well, I have a question for you, because in the Bill 21, the right to a lawyer is suspended. And the PGQ said, yes, that's correct. And the judge said, why? And the PGQ said, well, I don't know. The judge said, well, but should have a reason. I mean, you don't violate rights for no reason. So why do that right is suspended? And the answer was, I don't know. So see, I mean, we're talking the right to a lawyer in a variable, but the Parliament of Canada has the right to suspend the right to life. Think about it. 1 second. The right to life can be suspended for 5 years, for 10 years, for 100 years without giving any reason. We can reinstallate the penalty death. We can reinstallate restriction on abortion anytime, just like that. No reasons given. I mean, this is crazy when you think about it. So the audience in Supreme Court in March, that's what I was pleading. I mean, we have to think about because they're saying there's a compromise, 82 and all that, which is true. But when you say the word compromise, I mean, that means, in my opinion, that both parties put some water in their wine, right? They're trying to find a compromise. So what is the compromise here? We are giving each and every parliament in Canada the atomic bombs in their hands. Say, do whatever you like, whenever you like, preemptively if you like. You don't have the obligation to mention why you are doing that. Is that some kind of compromise? I think that the use as of now is violating the idea that we had in 82. And frankly, I think that we are leaning towards a democracy that do not worship any longer the fundamental rights. And if you don't have fundamental rights, you don't have in my opinion, a real rigorous democracy.
That's not democracy, it's autocracy. It's almost dictatorship. When you look at the history of the Notwithstanding Clause, it was a compromise by Trudeau and Chrétien to accept it on the basis that it would be used in extremely exceptional circumstances, and the people that pushed for it, the Western provinces, they said, "Oh well, we'll use it only if there's a judgment of the courts that makes it very difficult for us to apply right away." It was like a safeguard, and nobody raised the possibility of preemptive use. And then suddenly now with this government, it's become a routine. It's like I give you a gift, but then I say, well, it's conditional on me taking the gift back anytime I want. And
And I could add something on that very quickly. In 1982, the word was that when a politician used the notwithstanding clause, there will be a political cost attached to that. I mean, you want to use the notwithstanding clause, you have to go in front of the voter saying, "Well, I'm spending your right. You're gonna pay the price, you bastard," right? What's happening right now in 2026? Let's be serious. Each and every parliament used the notwithstanding clause for one reason, for electoral gain, because they know that the majority of voters will be supporting that measure. Take a look to what's happening with Alberta right now.
Right.
Daniel Smith just decided that the liberty of association, so the right to strike, no longer exists for education. Well, this is your convention, guys. You don't need to sign it anyway. I'm imposing it. That's it. We're doing this for labor. We're doing this for sexual identity. Take a look to what's happening with Ford right now.
Yeah.
For an encampment.
Yeah. So where do we draw the line?
Yeah, but that's the point. The proposal I've made in front of the Supreme Court in the name of the FAE, which is my client, is very simple. Let's use a test that already exists. The first condition of the Oaks test, saying that the legislator, the parliament, has to demonstrate that when they use a notwithstanding clause, it's because it has an objective that is real, that exists, and urgent. And then the court would have, if they accept my proposal, obviously, would have just to analyze the use of, that precise notwithstanding clause in that precise situation. Is that urgent? Is that real? Is that serious? Or just, an electoral twist?
So my question as you explain this, Fred and Mr. Licken, is this. How do you put the genie back in the bottle? If provinces are using this willy-nilly, in essence, in this case preemptively, how do you take a step back? Because if the federal government wanted to get involved and say, at some point, no, you can't do this, the provinces will simply say, well, no, you can't tell us what to do, and we're going to keep doing this. How does that get...
But I mean, I think the federal government has got to be blamed as well there, because it never really opposed the preemptive use.
Yeah.
It's for the first time now, the Minister of Justice, Sean Fraser, is the first one that has raised this issue and said we've got to re-examine it to see whether, and I'm hoping on Bill 21, which is before the Supreme Court now, that the Supreme Court at least will set some guidelines to say exactly what Fred was saying, that there must be a debate. You've got to prove the reason for using it.
It's necessary.
Which was the case then, which was the case in 81, in 88 when I was involved. The evolution since has been just devastating, because now it's become a measure that nobody... And I think the governments use it, knowing that people don't understand these things. They don't worry about
And now everybody's terrified. Like the federal government's terrified to say anything about Quebec using it. The other provincial parties are, like the Liberals in Quebec, are not. Nobody's going to speak against it.
And this is confirming what I'm saying. We're living in the moment right now, and it's not only in Quebec or Canada. It's everywhere in Occident. We're living in a moment where suspending fundamental rights is cool, right? Defending fundamental rights is not cool at all, and I know what I'm talking about, and you too, right? Yeah. So I mean, that is why they're also scared to say, well, we should not use notwithstanding clause for no reason. Take a look to what Charles Migal just said a few weeks ago. Right. I mean, so if the Liberals are scared to say what the notwithstanding clause might be a problem, then
yeah.
What is more, with the federal government, that they introduced it with Bill C-13. They introduced the notwithstanding clause by making a reference to Bill 96, which includes it. And when you get the federal government being so scared that it accepts this, then we've got a really a fundamental problem, really.
So for people, you pointed out something interesting. People, the general public doesn't really understand how this works, which is why, you talk about it and it kind of tends to go over most people's heads. It's kind of, inside baseball. But I wonder, can you just give people who are watching now an idea, how does the Clarity Act, or how would the Clarity Act come into play?
As of now?
Yeah.
Frankly, you want to go first?
No, you
okay,
go
sure. Okay. For me, the Clarity Act is based on the secession reference in 1998 of the Supreme Court of Canada, which is one of the best decisions, in my opinion, the court rendered. It's one of the most important, and that's the sort of decision. That decision was used in the Edinburgh in London negotiations for the Scotland referendum in 2014.
Okay.
That's the first decision of the National Court about the secession of a province or state of a country. So, the Clarity Act just copy some kind of some part of the decision, but the problem is, my opinion, is that it goes even further. When they say, for me, that part of the Clarity Bill is the worst ever. When they're saying, think about it, well, there's going to be a referendum, all right, and we're going to tell you afterwards. Ottawa will tell you afterwards if we agree with the majority, if the majority is enough.
Yeah.
And I have quite a fight with Stéphane Dion at the time, because I wrote in a book that section was like in French, inique et loufoque, so unjust and ridiculous, whatever. And Dion was like so upset at me. It's not inique and loufoque. I said, yes, it is. I mean, you have to tie your hands at first, saying, well, for me, the clear majority is this or it's that. You cannot say it afterwards.
So no actual specific numbers.
No.
It's just vague.
Yeah, and so the joke is about it. What is for Stéphane Dion a clear majority?
Yeah,
For Stéphane Dion, a clear majority is the result obtained plus one.
But to me, the good part of the Clarity Act, I think 50% plus one makes sense to me. And if you don't say if it's 2/3 or then it should be 50%. But the one good side is they ask for a clear question.
Yeah.
And I think that's
I was going there.
that's a plus, because the questions are always convoluted. You can see what Alberta is doing now. It's always the same little game where you make it so convoluted that people are confused and they don't know. So one good thing of the Clarity Act is to say, well, say you want, just like it happened with Scotland.
Yeah.
You want to
6
separate
words.
6 words.
And you know what?
Are you going to be for or against?
And don't forget one thing, that the Scotland referendum was based on the Supreme Court decision that I mentioned, in the sense that both actors decided to consult and to agree on the process.
Therein lies the difference, right? You had both the UK and Scotland agreeing to the question.
Preemptively.
Yeah, here you have a government, if we're looking at Quebec, who doesn't want to consult with the federal government, is insulted by the fact that they even need to consult with the federal government, and will simply ask the question they want.
But now with the Clarity Act, if the question that they put forward is a convoluted question, then the federal government is going to right to come in and say, hey, you better just change the question. So that part of it, I think, is very important.
Well, I remember the Sovereignty Association question threw everybody for a loop, because what are they saying?
I remember that question, 114 words.
Right.
And referendum in 95, 40 something words. Scotland questions, 6 words.
Yeah.
And the first proposal was that should Scotland become an independent country? And the Electoral Commission of England or the United Kingdom said, no, we cancel that. It's too subjective. So the real question should be not should, but shall Scotland become an independent country? So, I mean, and you know what? On the other way, I mean, London made some compromise saying, well, we agree if the age of the voters is, the minimum age is 16 and whatever. And if you guys vote yes, we take the undertaking of bringing you in the European Union and all that. I was there to watch what's going to happen. And you know what? That was clear from A to Z. And this is a model we should certainly copy on here.
Would part of it here be too, so in talking about this, if there is a referendum question here, of how many people actually vote, right? And I think the turnout last time might have been in the 90% range.
94.
If we're at 60 or 70%, should that be a vote that determines the future of the province?
there's there's something that is said about the clear majority, which is a problem. They say, well, 50+1 is the law of the majority around the world. It's true for so many things, but for secession, that's not true. Take a look at the referendum in Montenegro, for instance. The majority that was imposed by the UN was 55. So it's not a rule. If you ask me, I think that 50+1 is way enough. I mean, otherwise it's like arbitrary. 55 or the half of this or half of that qualified, whatever. 50+1, I think it's good enough, but I do agree with you. Please ask a clear question. There are some studies from Régent Pelletier, who was the professor at University Laval, that demonstrate that in 95, something like 28 or 29 people that voted yes thought that Quebec would remain some part of Canada in a way, which is quite a problem.
Which kind of brings up the question: what's your definition of a clear question versus my definition of a clear question? I mean,
shall Quebec become an independent
state? That's all.
Seems to me they would never ask a question that simple.
But you know what? Jacques Parizeau, afterwards, in his biography published in 97, 98, so right after the referendum, said, the question I would have asked is, est-ce que voulez-vous que le Québec devienne un pays souverain? Okay, so the question is for Jacques Parizeau, well, why you didn't ask that question? I would have said, because the reason is very simple. You would have never got 49. You probably have got like 42. So it takes courage to be clear. And don't remember that when Lucien Bouchard arrived in 95 at the very end, I mean, the yes side did not have 40%. They were like around 37, 38, and Bouchard arrived with his charisma and all that, and the associate, the partenariat and all this and all that. So a lot of people thought, well, okay, we're keeping our passport, we're keeping the same money, we're keeping the citizenship, so we're staying in Canada. In other words, we just have some advantage. We're going to get some more powers for whatever we like. But as for the rest, we don't take any risk. Well, that's not separation, right? I mean, there's a risk related to that. I think it's a very legitimate question for each and every nation in the world. But frankly, let's be transparent.
Do you think what's happened in Alberta has empowered separation here?
Oh, yeah.
Well, it certainly has got an impact. I mean, it gives courage, more. It encourages the PQ or this. And then they've got another excuse. It's not only us. Look at Alberta. And, but I think the question is the key. And the clearer it is, the less possible will be the separation.
But the fact is that you bring up a good point that when M. Bouchard came in, so support for separation was, like you say, 40. So now maybe it's 30. But are you thinking, well, perhaps these comments are thinking like, and with Alberta and all the rest, that they can also build up momentum, maybe not ask the clearest question in the world?
I think the Bouchard case was due to his charisma, to the passion that the difference was, I remember before Bouchard came, Daniel Johnson, as you know, was Premier of Quebec. And Daniel is a very brainy guy. I know him very, very well. He's smart.
Perhaps not charismatic.
But he doesn't have that kind of emotional bent in him. And the minute Bouchard came, you remember Parizeau had commissioned these studies, and there were big books like this. And Bouchard piled up the books on a table, and he said, I tell you what the referendum is about. He pushed the books out. He said, it's about the soul of Quebec. And right away, the polls went up because he spoke to emotion and people liked that.
That was crazy. He said precisely that. He said, well, that's economy. I don't want to talk about economy. I want to talk about who we are. He goes, wait. Okay, so that's it. All those studies from their side were no longer counting. So that was magic.
But doesn't Monsieur Saint-Pierre Plamondon kind of do the same thing?
You are comparing Mr. Bouchard?
No, I'm saying, but isn't that what he's trying to do? Like work.
But it'll be more difficult because I don't think he's the same kind of person, But at the same time, on the other side, this is where Charles Bérard has got to really put on the emotion. He's got to, because people here are motivated by the passion of Quebec, and you got to speak to the soul. And
Perhaps to Bill's point, I'm trying to Lloyd Benson famously said to Dan Quayle in that vice presidential debate, Mr. Quayle, you're no John F. Kennedy. I think Paul St. Pierre Plamondon is not no Lucien Bouchard. Fair to say.
And the problem for him is that there are no Lucien Bouchard waiting in the bunker anywhere, right? I mean, it's not Yves François Blanchet who would arrive and people would like, oh, wow. So I don't see any Lucien Bouchard around. He's a politician he was one of a kind, right?
By the way, to be fair, Lucien Bouchard not that long ago actually told Paul St. Pierre,
Don't do that.
don't do it.
It's not time to do this.
Many times ago.
Consider too.
Yeah, but I mean, they want to, whatever.
Gentlemen, we got to wrap it up. I want to thank you so much, Mr. Lincoln. Thank you for being here, Fred Byrne. Thank you for being here. We'll see you again soon on another edition of the Corner Booth Podcast.